Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Talking Away the Taboo. This is a special bonus edition. We are in the middle talking about 8 stories for 8 nights of Hanukkah, and we're featuring all different kinds of fertility stories, different people on different kinds of journeys. And we are thrilled today to be bringing you Shira Collings, who is one of our support group leaders. She's absolutely incredible, and she's had her own fertility journey that has been more private up until this point, and she is ready to share a little bit about it in order to help the rest of you. So I am going to be grabbing Shira. This is the time to do it. You'll see her in a few moments. It is, okay, here she is. Hi.
Hi.
Okay, excellent. You can hear me. I can hear you. I can see you. We're already like better than half of these things.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
amazing. So first of all, so just as a reminder and introduction for people, um, just give people, I told people a little bit who you are, but introduce yourself and tell people, besides obviously being one of the support group leaders here at I Was Supposed to Have a Baby, just remind people who you are in general, in your life, in your world, in all your things. And then we'll get into your story.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm a therapist in Philadelphia. I primarily specialize in LGBTQ affirming and neurodiversity affirming eating disorder therapy. Um, and I'm also a miscarriage and bereavement doula. Um, and I live in Philly with my husband and our 2 cats. And I'm part of the LGBTQ and neurodivergent communities myself. So I'm really passionate about providing loss support and eating disorder support in ways that are affirming to those spaces and those identities.
And we are thrilled that you're here. Okay, so I think let's go back. And what I'm curious about for you is when you were thinking about going into the mental health space, you like, did you know what you wanted to specialize in, or like was this your specific focus in terms of your work was something that developed because of certain circumstances in your life? And then I want to sort of launch into your story also.
Yeah, I do have personal experience with eating disorders and disordered eating, and so I wanted to specialize in it because of that. In those areas, um, I I didn't know for sure if that was something I wanted to specialize in, or if that was something I wanted to maybe have be like a tangential piece of my work, an area that I was interested in, but not the main focus. But just throughout grad school, and then especially when I did my internship, I discovered that's really something I was passionate about, and really like highly specialized in that area. But I really had no idea that fertility or pregnancy loss or reproductive loss or reproductive identity would be a huge focus of my work. It's something I've kind of been interested in, and for sure wanted to learn more about. But when it became personal to me and I was on my personal journey, that's when it became something I was really interested in addressing as part of my therapy work as well.
Okay, I mean, I know for some people that, like, I'll use myself as an example. So I'm a pediatrician by training because I always loved kids, and I wanted to be able to try to take care of them in their most vulnerable times, in the sense that when they were sick or through their health, their regular visits. But that was at a point where I had no personal experience of my own of having children. I was younger, and I just, that wasn't the stage of my life, but it was something that I was really passionate about. And I know for people in the fertility world, sometimes it's that there's been there's been a friend, a family member, someone in their life that have sort of introduced them to that world, and then they become passionate about it, and and lots of other things, or there's been some kind of personal experience. So I guess my question to you is, what um for, can you share a little bit about your fertility journey? I know that it has been not a straight and narrow path, as evident by the title of this conversation. And so I'm wondering if you could, like, take us back. Like, I was trying to figure out, like, what was the chicken and what was the egg, like which piece came first in terms of your own professional training and your interests. But let's start with the chicken or the egg. I'm not even sure which one we're starting with here. But take us back to the beginning, and start us from where you were thinking about the rest of your life, about what that might look like.
Yeah. So I guess that maybe starts with um, maybe around when I was getting serious with the person who's now my husband. Um, and we were initially having conversations about having kids. And we both really like kids, and it was something we both were really interested in. Um, but we just weren't totally sure if we wanted to have our own. Um, and specifically for me, I do have some medical trauma, and I'm quite like phobic of medical settings. It's gotten much better, but it used to be really bad.
I'm
And so
so sorry.
thank you. We're even like getting a filling at the dentist used to be like a terrible um, panic-inducing experience.
I mean, getting fillings at the dentist, I think for most people are trauma-inducing
Yeah,
experiences, but I hear you.
yeah.
I don't know very many people who love the dentist, I'll just say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Um, yeah, but I always like to distinguish, like there is a difference between
Yep.
not liking
Yes.
versus really having like debilitating panic attacks or
Yes.
episodes of just like being unable to function or work because it's so scary. Um, and
Totally.
so that is kind of where I've been at in the past. And so, because of that, I kind of ruled out or really felt hesitant about the possibility of biological kids, um, going down that path. And so we kind of were exploring other options, but it just wasn't, it didn't become a huge conversation for a while. It was just kind of something um, that we would revisit from time to time, check in about, and just see, because we felt like, okay, if we're not having biological kids, there's no real clock on this. Although, of course, there can be, a clock with adoption, but or other types of options, but it felt less so that way. But then kind of as we started exploring other options, and really looking into them, we did kind of realize um, there's a lot of complexity and a lot of difficulty in those paths. And so we did end up starting to try to go down the path of having kids biologically. There was a lot of ambivalence, both because of the medical phobia piece, but also because of just the piece of are we ready for this? Do we want this? Are we doing this before we're ready? Because it feels like there's more of a biological clock, that kind of thing. I'm someone who likes to be really sure of decisions, and feel really ready for whatever I'm heading into. And with parenthood, I didn't feel that way from the very beginning. It took a while.
Can I
Um,
can I ask you, was it when so like if I were to try to sort of put a tagline on the emotions that you were experiencing, or maybe the two of you, it was not that you didn't want to have children, but it was that you were uncertain that you wanted to go down the route of having a biological child because of the complexity of some of the things you were talking about.
yeah,
Is that right?
for sure. Um, yeah, I think that's kind of the biggest piece of it. I think it was also, looking at the other paths to parenthood that also felt really complex. And there are, yeah, plenty of really challenging parts of those paths as well. And then also, um, there, I think, um, as we were starting our life together and everything, and I was in grad school and taking out loans for that and everything, there were questions about just like finances and being emotionally ready. Again, there's no question we both really like kids and never really questioned that, but it was more about um, do we want to take this on as in terms of having our own kids? Are there any paths that feel like feasible and feel right for us? Or do all of the paths have too many challenging parts that we just would prefer to play a role in a kid's life in some other way?
Right. Can
Uh,
you are you comfortable sharing some of the any of the pieces of the other paths? Like, I mean, you mentioned adoption already. I don't know if there were other things that you were considering, but are you comfortable sharing any of the pieces that like were enticing about those paths, and also things that inevitably ended up dissuading you from those paths?
yeah. Um, yeah, definitely adoption was something we were very interested in. I think cost was a huge piece that ended up dissuading us, and just how much it is. I think it's a very extensive and intrusive process for, I know there are valid reasons for that, but that is obviously can be very psychologically tough. Um, and I also, because I have my own mental health history and um, I have, yeah, experiences of mental health treatment and things like I worried about that being a barrier um, to adoption and how that process would go. And so, um, yeah, there was a lot of anxiety about that. But it was very appealing to us because we both just love the idea of playing a role in a kid's life. Without having to subject ourselves, or specifically me, to a lot of the healthcare experiences and um, invasive medical procedures involved with like pregnancy and fertility and everything. Um, so that was appealing. We also both had questions about the ethics of bringing a child into this world. There's a lot of things that are really scary and headed in, it feels like, a not great direction all the time. And so we felt like, maybe adopting was more ethical in some ways, and that you're not bringing someone here without getting to ask them if they want to be here, that kind of thing. Um, but at the same time, I know there's also plenty of ethical challenges with adoption, and it depends on the agency and um, everything that goes into that. So that was another deterrent for us, is worrying about doing that ethically.
I,
Um,
you know, I so much appreciate just even like the nuance that you're sharing here, because I think a lot of people make assumptions about number one, like just having kids, like that, oh, well, you should just, just go and have a kid, like just, I don't really think about it beforehand. And then secondly, there are a lot of comments that are thrown out specifically in regard to adoption, but there are comments that are thrown out when people aren't successful on their own fertility journeys, when they're trying by themselves first. And people say, oh, well, you should just go and adopt. Like, I love the word
Right.
just, because just is like the word that encapsulates like, oh, it should be so easy, just adopt. And people don't realize, number one, like all the things that you're saying, like, it's a lot of money. Number two, there are tons and tons of investigation and different kinds of forms and different um as you were saying, like invasive ways that the agencies take a look at the intended parents and like see whether like they determine whether you're fit to be a parent, and also just the ethics of taking a child away from their own natural environment or culture or geography or whatever that is. And so I think when I love when like someone says like just go adopt, and then you come back at them with like a list of things. Well, actually, you know here's my list of why just adopting is not really the answer
Right.
here.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's so important to recognize because that is something that I was told on my fertility journey, because then I experienced recurrent loss. And then I did get a lot of, well, you wanted to adopt anyway, so why don't you just do that? And it's like, well, there's a reason that having a biological kid sounded pretty traumatizing to me, pretty hard to go through. And I chose to pursue that anyways. Now I have been pregnant 5 times, so there's a reason I'm choosing that anyways. And there's so many challenges with adoption, and but then the other side of that is that I feel like when I shared with people that I was really interested in adopting and I wasn't so sure about biological kids, there was all this questioning of like, why? Like, if you're physically able to have biological kids, then why wouldn't you do that? And don't you know how hard adoption is? And isn't that creating such a challenging path for yourself? And I mean, yes, it is, but like, so is pregnancy and parenthood that way for many people. And so, I think we just need to be, it's not black and white. Like, there needs to be nuance and the understanding that like all paths to parenthood have their challenges and positive aspects, as does being child free. Like, that also is a super valid path and a super challenging path.
Uh,
Yeah,
a, 1,000%. And I mean, that's everything that we do here
totally.
at I Was Supposed to Have a Baby, talk about all the different pathways. Um, okay, so you are at this point where you are now, okay, well, maybe actually we should go back and look at becoming parents, not through adoption. Talk me through that mindset, your mindset, and how you were able to move forward in there.
Yeah, I think it felt really scary and anxiety inducing. And again, I think once we started considering that, it did all of a sudden feel like there's time pressure and that there, in a way that there hadn't been before. And so um, that felt like a really hard aspect of it. Having been in kind of the fence sitter ambivalent camp, it felt like, oh no, I need to make a decision soon. And like, am I making this decision for the right reasons, or am I just making it because I feel that time pressure? Um, and so it was hard and it was painful and it was isolating because people really don't talk about ambivalence around parenthood. Um, that's just something that I feel like people don't talk about, people don't share. There's not a lot of like resources or spaces for that. So that was a really difficult piece. But I did really want to explore it as an option. And one thing that helped was just learning about different resources that are available to people with medical trauma or who are very anxious in medical settings. And so just kind of finding providers that are sensitive to that, learning. I currently have to have a C-section for
Oh,
medical reasons,
wow.
um, but I actually, before even like starting this process or thinking about biological kids, I did learn that insurance is required to cover. I'm sure they get around it in some cases, but at least on paper, they're required to cover a C-section for PTSD or for mental health reasons as well, a voluntary C-section. And so that was an option that really spoke to me and felt like something I could potentially get through. And it felt like I started to be open to the idea that there are ways to manage some of the really anxiety inducing or potentially re-traumatizing parts of healthcare settings. And I had recently moved to Philadelphia and I felt like it was a bigger city than I'd lived in previously, so I'd have access to more resources. So that was a big piece of it. And yeah, I think just kind of looking at the options available and feeling like unfortunately, we do have a culture where I think adoption or um, other paths to parenthood just aren't as like supported or legitimized. There's more stigma around them, and I think realizing that okay, biological parenthood, while it's certainly anxiety inducing, and I had my ethical concerns, I felt like in a lot of ways that it was going to be the least stigmatized and therefore I'd have like the most support to go about that. And so if that was available to me, I wanted to pursue that. But it was a very complex decision for sure.
It sounds like it. I mean, I'm wondering, how, was this a decision that you made and then your husband supported, or was it something that, like, were his feelings the same? Was he also like would have been fine either way? Um, and I'm also curious. Well, let me ask you that first, and then I'll ask my next question.
Yeah, I feel really grateful that our feelings were pretty much the same. We were on the same page throughout the whole journey, and he would have been fine either way. And I think he felt like because it was my body going through it, and because it was such a huge life-changing thing for me and my body and my medical trauma coming up and all of that, like he almost had less of a say than I did, which I don't know if that's fair. Like, of course, it is his decision too, and his feelings matter a lot. And we talked it through a lot. One thing that helped significantly with my ambivalence is that he's planning to be a stay-at-home dad. Um, so
Okay.
that that is a circumstantial factor that makes me feel much less anxiety about parenthood. Um, and he's very excited about that. So of course, like, it's his decision too, but I think he always felt like um, ultimately it is like my opinion carries more weight because it is my body. And I do feel just really grateful for that.
I look, as in all relationships, it takes, when you have this, when there are two people coming into a specific situation, it's helpful when both of them are on the same page. It doesn't always happen that way, but it's really wonderful that that was the case here. I mean, absolutely incredible. I could you speak before we get into the actual pregnancy itself, or at least the first pregnancy? Could you speak a little bit about the kind, like you mentioned, like resources, you know, you knew you would have more support. You knew you could reach out for more support. You were in a city with more support. Can you actually be a little bit more specific in terms of what did you do? Like for anyone who has any kind of trauma around pregnancy or any kind of ambivalence around pregnancy, um, I mean, the term tocophobia, people who are scared of being pregnant, the people who are scared of going through labor or giving birth, um, those are real disorders. But then there are obviously other people, maybe like yourself, who have other things in the past that are contributing to that piece of it. Like, what were some of the practical things that you actually did that helped work you through some of these pieces to get you to the point of where you were willing to try? I think that piece could speak really to those people who are dealing with these kinds of trauma or anxiety,
Yeah,
could be really helpful.
absolutely. I think really finding providers who had experience with that and who are very patient-centered and respect people's autonomy. So I think one of the first things I did was find a trauma-informed doula who specifically has experience working with people with trauma histories, in particular, like medical trauma and sexual trauma, and has a lot of experience advocating for trauma-informed medical care and knowing what different options are that might make someone feel comfortable in a medical setting. So that was one of the first steps I took. And then she recommended a number of providers who are trauma informed, and then kind of along with trauma informed, LGBT affirming and affirming of all the things. Um, and so I really, I think, just spent a lot of time like getting to know providers or asking questions or just kind of trying to make sure that that whoever I was working with like had experience with people who have had trauma and who really want to support whatever it is that makes the person, the patient, most comfortable. So for me, I really like experiencing a large degree of pain in medical settings is like very tough for me and distressing. And so I really liked the idea, even before a C-section was required. I liked the idea of a voluntary C-section where I can recover at home and just know exactly like how it's going to go in the medical setting and what steps are involved. And then for the part where it's going to be most painful, it's more like home care and there's pain medication available. And so the doula that I worked with and had reached out to was very supportive of that and had ideas for different doctors that would support that plan.
Amazing.
So yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. I think therapy helped. I did start seeing a therapist specializing in perinatal mental health care, and that's certainly helpful. But ultimately, I think a lot of people with tocophobia or medical trauma, medical phobias, whatever someone's struggle might be, are told like just go to therapy and then you'll get over your fear. And as a therapist, I think that that's important, but what happens outside the therapy room is also really important. And I think medical providers can make such a huge difference in like taking active steps to make someone feel more comfortable. Um, yeah, it's also been helpful though to be a part of support groups or um, explore different resources online, kind of talking about those topics, listen to podcasts and things. Yeah, just get to know others, feel less alone. But I think the biggest thing is like, um, I've had such negative experiences of the healthcare system in the past. So having like concrete positive experiences and feeling heard and listened to goes such a long way
Uh,
to disappear.
Yeah, I deeply appreciate that. And as with I think all mental health or any kind of challenges in the mental health realm, the reality is that we know therapy only goes so far, and you need you need a combination of factors in order to move past or move through whatever it is someone is struggling with. So absolutely. Um, Okay, so now take us into so you built your support. I'm like you like using my arms for people who are just listening to the audio here. I'm like building this like circle sort of in the air here. So you built your circle of support for the people who you felt comfortable with, who you knew could get you through whatever you were going through. Um, so talk to us about that first pregnancy.
Yeah. Um, so I got pregnant much more quickly than I expected. I hadn't studied the statistics well, and in my head, it was maybe like 3 to 5% of people who would get pregnant the first month. And so I was like, okay, I have a while anyways. Like, I'm just going to ease into this. I'm just going to kind of explore these resources. And it'll probably take 6 months to a year to get pregnant. And I got pregnant right away. And that was very terrifying. I really I really felt the ambivalence. I had wanted it and I was walking into it and I was like, whoa, this all happened really quickly, that I went from kind of being a fence sitter to being like, okay, let's explore this biological kid's path to like suddenly being pregnant. Um, and so um, it was rough. I also had very severe nausea and vomiting, which I'll talk more about. I finally, this pregnancy, got diagnosed with HG, but that was really rough. I was not prepared at all for that. And so that was just kind of debilitating. I felt like kind of a shell of the person I am. And um, yeah, it was honestly just a really rough experience. And then yeah, the pregnancy ended, and um, yeah, I felt pretty devastated about that, but it all just kind of felt like such a whirlwind of emotions and just um, everything feeling so unexpected.
I'm sure, I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm guessing that there was also a piece of relief in that, like you never expected to get pregnant that quickly, and then you were sort of thrust into it, and then you had all of these like crazy symptoms that which you also didn't expect, and it was a pregnancy that you were grateful for, and so I'm sure there was this like being devastated that the pregnancy was not viable anymore, but then also somewhat a relief on one side. Like balancing those emotions must have been really, really hard.
It was, yeah, it was really hard. Um, and that's something that I still feel a lot of guilt and shame over a lot of the time, that there was relief there. And there was, especially after I've had more losses, I feel like, did I cause that? Is that my punishment? And I know it's not, but like, the fact that there was some relief, and the fact that I did feel like so ambivalent that pregnancy, it feels very, it's such a source of guilt and shame. And I do think in the lost world sometimes, it's so understandable, but there can be this narrative of like, oh, can you believe that person got pregnant so easily? Like it was an accident. They didn't even want it to happen. Or this person, uses this substance and got pregnant so easily and had a baby so easily. And it does get into my head sometimes when I see that. I'm like, oh, is that what people would think of me if they knew that I was so ambivalent? Like I felt some relief around that pregnancy ending, and yet here I am able to be pregnant again, and I'm currently 30 and a half weeks pregnant. And so um, it's like, is that unfair? I mean, there's no fairness to any of this, but that's definitely a source of shame and guilt
I,
a lot.
I'm so sorry that I mean, it is unfortunately so common that you and so many people in your shoes feel that way. I'm going to say it again, even though you said it already. You know it's not your fault. I'm telling you again, it's not your fault. And that we all know that our thoughts and our desires can't cause pregnancy losses. Um, and yet it's still there's I like I'm hearing you as like as you're saying it, even sitting here now, being currently pregnant, there is still a piece that you're carrying with you, and I thank you for sharing that with us. I think it's well, this is the world in which we live. These are the natural emotions that people carry, and you're 1,000% right that everybody does make judgments on the worthiness, so to speak, of people who get pregnant easily, whether they were worthy to have that. And it's I would say it's ridiculous, but it's not ridiculous because it's just these natural emotions that people
Of course,
have.
of course.
um but they're unfounded. No one person is more worthy or less worthy of getting pregnant or keeping or holding a pregnancy than another, as we know.
Absolutely.
um how I guess, can you speak about like what gave you the courage to then do this again? And then we'll get to and again and again and again and again. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I think I after that first pregnancy, I went to therapy. That's when I sought out someone specialized in perinatal mental health care and talked through a lot of my fears and anxieties and um, just kind of had that space to explore and talk about it. I also read the book The Baby Decision,
Okay.
um, and that was really helpful to me.
Uh, t-
Just
Tell people more about the book.
it's great. It's a book for people who feel ambivalent about whether or not they want to have a child. And she just kind of guides you through different like exercises and different perspectives to consider. And I just love it because it's such it feels very like fair and balanced in terms of how each path is portrayed and just kind of combats combats the demonization of either path. I think in our culture, we really have this tendency to like think in very black and white terms around both paths, that either parenthood is like so hard and so awful and so much work, and being child free is just so fun and so freeing, and you just like enjoy your lavish, luxurious life all the time, or like vice versa, being child free is like selfish and empty and meaningless, and having children is like the most fulfilling thing that could ever happen to you. And the book just like adds a lot of nuance and is like, there are ways to be fulfilled as a child-free person, and there are hardships that come with being child-free, and
Of course. Yeah.
there are things you can enjoy as a parent, and ways to like make time for yourself, and it doesn't have to be this self-sacrificial narrative that we tell. So it was just it helped with my anxiety a lot, and at that point I really felt like I got pregnant quickly. I don't think like the narrative that's told with when you have one miscarriage is or one pregnancy loss is like that's super normal. That's there's nothing about that is like concerning. It's if you got pregnant quickly, like great, like um, go ahead. So I wasn't super worried about trying again. And I had this narrative of like, oh, maybe I just needed like a practice round to really figure out that like this is what I really want and want to pursue and am looking forward to. And I felt like more confident. And yeah, then I felt so naive for thinking that after I then experienced recurrent loss.
But that is I just to validate that part. I mean that is what at least the medical world tells people who have had one
Yeah,
loss. They say, "Oh, it happens. It's common. It happens in 1 in 4 pregnancies. Don't worry. I'm sure you're fine. You're young. Everything will be fine." And like go and get pregnant again. That's
yeah,
effectively like the narrative that people share.
absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, even the words practice round were used like, oh, your body just kind of needed to practice getting pregnant and, now it can do the real thing or whatever. Um, yeah.
Okay, so how did that real round go for you? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I then experienced 3 more losses, and that was devastating. And with each one, I got more certain that this was definitely what I wanted, which was nice in some ways. And um, I felt like I know what I want. I think the responses that I got to my losses that were like really caring and considerate made me feel like this is what I want to give back in the world. And like, I want to have a child so that like I can be that person for them when they go through hard things. And like, I can't protect people from going through hard things, but um, I can be there for them, and that like makes such a difference. And I got really clear on that. But then, of course, as I felt more clear, it felt more and more like, is this going to happen for me?
Elusive. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah.
I are you comfortable sharing what the medical world was telling you at the time? I mean, like were there any answers or was it like just say like, well, just keep trying because we don't know what's going on? Like did they were there any suggestions as to a path to take to try to get it right, so to speak?
Yeah. There were different answers. We saw a few different doctors, and they each kind of proposed different answers. And so I'll never know what's the right answer, which is something from your story, I think, that really resonated with me. And I appreciate you kind of sharing that and how you put it. Um, but, but yeah, first they found fibroids, and including a submucosal fibroid, which I think does increase the risk of miscarriage. So I was told by one doctor that has to be it. I got it removed in an abdominal surgery, and then I went to another doctor because that doctor was like just a regular OBGYN, and then I ended up deciding to see a fertility specialist, and that doctor said, no, a fibroid can't cause a miscarriage that early on. That would be a second trimester miscarriage. Um, and so, um, even though I did have the testing that showed it was uh, at least one of them that I had enough tissue for was chromosomally normal. He said no, it's still, I think it's chromosomally abnormal, and so yeah, keep trying. But he did say maybe he looked into like when I was ovulating, and he thought it might be slightly delayed, and so I took letrozole to just like regulate that because he thought that could contribute to a chromosomal abnormality. Um, and then after I think the fourth loss, I got a second opinion, and that person said, no, if it tested chromosomally normal, then it is chromosomally normal, or we have every reason to assume it's chromosomally normal. And so, it probably was the fibroid, and this was another like fertility specialist. She said it probably was the fibroids, and it probably, yeah, was not a chromosomal abnormality or anything to do with ovulation. So just kind of, yeah, try again now that the fibroids are removed. And then I ended up doing, after the fourth loss, I ended up doing the Receptiva test, which tests for endometriosis, is my understanding. And that came back positive, and so I did treatment for that. And then I tried again for this pregnancy, and this pregnancy has stuck. So I don't know if maybe it was the Receptiva. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if it was, because I think the other fertility doctor thought like, because I had two or three losses with before getting the fibroid removed, and then I had one that was like a chemical pregnancy. So I don't know, always know which terminology to use, if that counts as miscarriage or not. But I think she felt like it could just be that the fibroids cause losses, and then the you just had a chemical pregnancy, because that's just something that happens. But I think there was universal agreement that the endometriosis, treating it could lower the risk a little, but it probably wasn't like the cause, because it wasn't like detectable in the surgery. It was more like microscopic endometriosis or something. So who knows? I don't know. We were fostering a black cat with some baby, adorable baby black kittens for like a year or so. And yeah, I think three of the losses happened during that time.
Oh,
And then
whoa.
yeah, and then she got adopted, has a beautiful family now, and so because the mom cat like stayed with us for a while, that can happen, and then I had a pregnancy that has lasted up till this point. So maybe it was that, probably not. I really don't think so. I love black cats, and I don't think they're bad luck, but it's just up in the air, and we'll never
You
know.
know, you're just as you're sharing all of these pieces, it's just reminding me exactly like what you were saying. Like, it might have been this, it might have been this, it might have been that, and then like, but at the end of the day, you don't know, and so my question is like, so what gave you the strength to keep going instead of like saying, oh, I can't do this. Like maybe the universe is just telling me like this is not happening. Like it's been too much, it's too long, it's too this. Like what at that point, or at maybe each juncture point, like what gave you the strength to keep going?
I honestly think it wasn't strength. I think it didn't feel like a choice. Um, I think as it um, got further and further into um, the fertility journey, and with each pregnancy, I just felt more and more sure that like I wanted it. It felt like I needed to. It became yeah, a need, I think. And I think too, with there's just biological factors as well, where I felt um, so empty, like, and just like, empty arms without a baby each pregnancy. And so it felt like, no, I have to continue. And I do think there was a fair amount of like guilt and shame around how I felt that first pregnancy and some of my reactions. And so it was like, I can't, um, like I can't stop this journey. Or I felt some like idea of like I have to do everything um, to become a parent, because um, I didn't want that. I guess like I didn't want the waiting and the ambivalence like um, to be the end of my story, or to define my story, or to feel like um, I was like, I guess I felt like I was ungrateful or not grateful enough that first pregnancy, and I wanted like a chance to like have a pregnancy and feel the full, that resulted in a living child, and feel the full like immense gratitude for it that I had developed over time, and in realizing that that was what I really wanted. Yeah, and think um, I think too, um, it felt it felt like because I had been ambivalent and I had taken so much time to decide and to come to this decision, it felt like once I really came to it, it was like very clear to me. And like I had spent so much time on it and done so much research and work, and like, um, I felt like it was more of a feeling of like drivenness than strength or courage. Yeah, it didn't feel like a choice. And that was definitely something that I think I felt frustrated by in the whole process, is like there is a lot of language of choice and choosing to do this, and it was like this doesn't even like feel like something voluntary. Like I have to, um, even though it was horrible because I'm a very medically phobic, uh, medically anxious person, and so fertility treatment, recurrent loss treatment, like all of the testing required for that was just brutal and traumatizing. And I, while I had a lot of luck in finding good doulas, good OBGYNs, um, like, yeah, good hospitals and everything, I did not have luck finding trauma informed or sensitive fertility doctors, really. And so um, it was really rough. And I think there was a lot of rhetoric of like, oh, well, you're still able to do it, and like you must really want this, and like, yes, but also it wasn't a matter of wanting it. It was just like, I have no choice. Like, of course I'm going to continue with this. Um,
I, I, as you were sharing your story about like how each time it didn't go well, that it didn't end, that it ended in a loss, as you were telling it, I found myself getting more and more anxious for you, knowing that you had to go through all of these different medical procedures and seeing different appointments and doctors and second opinions and third opinions and this that and the like, that in and of itself, even if if because knowing that you have this background of being uncomfortable and being really traumatized in medical settings. Yeah, just knowing that piece of it and knowing how much you had to do it made me just, I'm so sorry that you had to go through all of that.
thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate that. 'Cause yeah, I think that's a part of this that felt so minimized and so just like not talked about. Is this is Franklin.
Hello.
And
Shira's cat is now joining us for this
he
conversation.
likes to be part of the spotlight.
All
Um,
good.
but yeah, that's really not talked about, is like how the medical aspects can be so re-traumatizing and so awful for people who have had past histories of trauma, for neurodivergent people, for queer people who have been harmed in medical settings. Like there can just be so much harm. I mean, just for like women and like AFAB people, assigned female at birth people in general, um, we often have our pain so minimized and not listened to. And being in healthcare settings can be just really scary for that reason. And that's something that I think was just like not talked about. I think in the Jewish community in particular, this is so great, but I think we're so pro science and so pro medicine. And I am so glad that's, I think 99% of the time, a really, really positive thing. But I think sometimes it can just be this narrative of like, oh, aren't you so grateful? Like, are you seeing the best doctor? Like, aren't you so grateful for their expertise? They must be incredible, and it can be erased, that like it can be a really challenging and traumatic experience. And even if you're so grateful for the knowledge that doctors have and what they're able to do, it can still feel like really violating and distressing, just on like an embodied experience level.
1,000%. I actually have a friend, a personal friend of mine who has not been to a doctor in years. Um, she just has, she can't, she can't. There is too much trauma surrounding medicine in general for her. And she can't. And she does not have any children. She's married. She does not have any children. And so many times people have said to her or have said to her parents, why doesn't she just go to a fertility doctor? Like, what's the big deal? And it's exactly this. She just can't and she won't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Um, Okay, so you are now, as we're winding down here, you are now 30 plus weeks. You are, thank God, this, I wanted you to just chat a little bit about your experience with HG, which is hyperemesis gravidarum. I know you said that came about for the first time during your first pregnancy, where you were like really not feeling well. Can you just tell people a little bit about that and like how your experience was in all of the pregnancies and then specifically this one?
Yeah, um, just awful. I did not have it as bad as many people. I do just want to clarify that it's moderate HG, probably like mild to moderate. It was not putting me in any danger of like physical harm to the pregnancy or anything like that. But it just was constant, severe, debilitating nausea, where it just like really um, impacted my ability to function, and like just like couldn't do much. Was hard to hold down like certain meals or have much of an appetite, that kind of thing. And so, yeah, I just want to kind of both validate that like it can be far worse, and I'm grateful that it wasn't worse, but also even mild to moderate HG can be like a really horrible, miserable experience. And it's something that's just, again, not talked about a lot, or just minimized a lot. It took me a long time to get diagnosed. I ended up seeking out. There happens to be a specialized HG clinic in Red Bank, New Jersey, and I ended up going there, and they were great. And they gave me medication and like diagnosed me and everything, and had some good ideas. But most doctors were just like, "Oh, well, if you're not, losing this much weight, or you're not physically endangering the pregnancy, if you can hold down fluids, then you're good. Don't worry about it." So many people, their response would be like, "Oh, like, that's a sign of a healthy pregnancy, and that's a normal part of pregnancy. So you must be like so glad to be nauseous." And it's like, it was still a debilitating experience. And also I had very severe nausea that was undiagnosed as HG in two prior pregnancies that ended. So it's not necessarily the sign that I think people think it is. So yeah, it's just been really hard. And for me, as someone who has been ambivalent about parenthood, I think it's just it's fascinating how our brain chemistry works. But for me, it like really puts me into a state of like, can I do this? Like, what if I can't care for another human being? Like, when I'm really in it, and I was really nauseous, I was in such a state of like not being able to take care of myself, not being able to like stand up in the shower because I was so nauseous. And it was like, am I ever gonna get out of this? Like, what if the baby comes and I like feel so wiped out and I just can't take care of another human? But it has, luckily, I feel really grateful it has gotten better. And it got like moderately better in the second trimester. And then I think third trimester, it's been even better than that. And so it's night and day, like how I feel physically and emotionally. But yeah, it's really rough, and I feel like people don't talk about that aspect. People also, there's this narrative, of course, that I think we all talk about a lot of, like, don't tell anybody you're pregnant in the first trimester. And one thing I did after the first pregnancy was make a decision that, like, I'm going to tell people, I'm going to be open, because I do not deserve to be experiencing that level of nausea, and like having to hide it or not tell
Yeah.
people that's going on.
Yeah, because you need support, because
Yes.
you can't just not, like, by the way, I'm just not going to be functional for the X number of weeks,
Right.
months, or whatever it is. By the way, I'll just be checking out of life or work or
Right.
whatever else. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Um, okay. So Shira, sitting here now in this, like, really, like, long and windy journey that you've been on to parenthood, um, your thoughts, your closing thoughts, your advice for people who are in your shoes, and let's say, like, feeling ambivalent about whether they should, whether they shouldn't, um, thoughts for them about how to work themselves, how to get support, and come to a decision on their own as to how to move forward.
Um, I think I think the biggest thing I have to offer is just like validation that it can be so painful and lonely to be in that place. And so that's so real, and you're not alone. Everyone I've talked to who has been in that place feels like um, some pain and loneliness around it, and there's just not great support. But so yeah, just know you're not alone. I do think resources like the baby decision. There's also one specifically more for women called, I think, Motherhood. Is it for me? Um,
Is that
and I know,
is that a book? Is that a book?
yes,
Okay.
yeah. Those are both books that can be helpful. I think the author of the one I just mentioned maybe has a course,
Okay.
like for people to help get some clarity.
We're
There
we're
are
gonna link we're gonna link both of those in the notes for this.
great. Um, yeah, there are therapists who specialize in this area. So just know, like, there are resources out there that can help a lot. And there's the fence sitters subreddit. That's the only, like, any kind of group or community that I know of that is for folks who are ambivalent, but that does exist. Maybe one day I'll start a support group for people who are ambivalent. But I guess um, yeah, I would say, in addition to that, like, just a couple things. One is that I think both paths are, or all paths, because there's so many paths to parenthood, there's so many ways that being child-free can look, and different paths people can take with that. And like, they're all valid, and one isn't better than the other. Um, and it's just a hard decision. Like, I just want to validate that it's a hard decision. There's so many um, unique costs and benefits and challenges, and really amazing parts to each. And so whatever you choose, like, it's totally valid, and it's also not an easy decision. I think we really have this idea that, like, it should be an easy decision, or it just is an easy decision, or once someone has made up their minds, like, okay, great, like, that's what they want. But like, there's grief and there's loss in giving up something, whatever path you choose. And so it's just all really valid. And then I guess the other thing the final thing that I want to say, because this is such a part of my journey, is that what I really, really feel passionate about is that like ambivalence doesn't make the grief less if you do decide to become a parent and you do struggle with infertility or loss, or, uh, circumstances that just make it not a reality or make it much harder than you expected. Um, if that does happen, like I think for me, I just kept feeling like I don't deserve to take up space in law spaces, because I was ambivalent. I don't have these stories that so many people have of like wanting to be a parent since I was 5 years old and having that taken away. Like it's been a lot more complicated. Um, and then just I hearing from others who were also ambivalent and then experienced loss or infertility, like I've just realized, like, yeah, of course people feel just as devastated and sad, and like we've poured our hearts into this decision and really thought about it carefully and come to the conclusion that we really, really want this. And then after all of that, to have that taken away is so painful. So like, I just want to validate that like those of us who have been ambivalent deserve to take up space in loss and grief spaces and still deserve support.
A 1,000%. And that's exactly why we're having this conversation. I mean, for many reasons, we're having this conversation, but we deeply believe, and I was supposed to have a baby, that all fertility journeys, regardless of what their our origin is, regardless of what their, I'm thinking about the grammar there, regardless of what their origin is, all fertility journeys deserve to be supported, period.
Absolutely.
And it's exactly what Shira said. At the end of the day, I sometimes hear from people in fertility, in infertility spaces. I sometimes hear, well, we've only been trying for 6 months, or we've only been trying for a year. And there are people here who have been trying for 3 years and 6 years and 10 years or 14 years. So they definitely deserve support, but I don't deserve support. And so to them, we say exactly the same thing. All fertility journeys, all emotions, all pain deserve to be supported always, period.
Yeah,
And that's why we're here.
absolutely. Yeah, and I just like so appreciate that about I was supposed to have a baby, and that's one of the major reasons I feel so grateful to be part of this organization, is that it really does feel like just there's this resounding message of everyone deserves support, and there's not a hierarchy of who deserves more support than others.
And that's exactly who we are. Shira, um, tell people where they can find you if they want to talk more about any of these different pieces of your story. I'm so, so grateful to you. I know that like you spoke a lot about guilt, about shame, about things in your past that have not been shared to a wider audience. And I'm deeply grateful to you for sharing this in order to bring support and comfort for other people who may be going through similar things. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, and for letting me share about these things. And yeah, if people want to get in touch, I do offer personalized one-on-one support in addition to the group I facilitate. So on the I Was Supposed to Have a Baby website, under personalized support, you can book a consult with me or a longer session if you'd like. And then if you just want to learn more about my work in general and some of the supports I offer, my website is just shiracollings.com.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Shira, thank you so much. And also, B'Sha'a Tova, everything should be in the right time. That's a Hebrew saying for those of you who are not familiar, for people who are pregnant, that you should have your baby in the right time and that you should be well and that the baby should be well and be healthy. And we look forward to good news.
Thank you so much.
All
I
right.
hope.
And Happy New Year, everybody. It is New Year's Eve, so we need to do that too.
Happy New Year.
Okay. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye.